Hi, my name is HelenGarraway, and I am the USA Today best-selling author of the Sentinel series and the SoulMist series, as well as a standalone dystopian science fantasy. I'm here today to talk about my latest novel, which is called Oblivion Gate, which launches tomorrow, July 1st. And Oblivion Gate completes the SoulMist series, so you've got three books, Soul Breather, Dragonbound, and Oblivion Gate. Um, and Oblivion Gate now completes that series, which is very, very exciting. So the SoulMist series is about a fallen angel called Demavrian, who's fallen into shadow and into the gloomy world of Eidolon, and he has to prove his innocence of all the things that he's being accused of, in order for him to be able to return to Peronia, because he's been soul stripped and lost his soul, and you can only live in Peronia if you have a soul for more, and you can only, if you don't have a soul, you'll only survive for 24 hours. So, or 24 turns, as it's called in the SoulMist series. So he can't return and stay in the place of his birth. So he's got to try and prove his innocence of the various things he's being accused of, in order for him to figure out how to redeem his soul and be able to return to the life he had, if that's what he wants to do, of course. He's spent many, many years in the shadows, and once you fall into the shadows, do you really want to return back to the light, is the question. So today I'm just going to read a chapter from Oblivion Gate, and there are quite a few different choices or nuggets within this book, and it's actually, let me just show you. Oblivion Gate is actually quite a big book, has quite a, it's I stop writing it, I don't think. And although I considered splitting it into two books, the book is as long as it needs to be. So I ended up just including it all in one book. So you get um, extra story over and above the top of what I might have originally have written, I suppose. Um, but here we go. I'm going to read from chapter 14. So it's a little way in, but I wanted to sort of choose something around the fledglings, because the fledglings do play an important part in Demavrian's world, and I think it really does play into like the found family trope, as in Mav has adopted fledgling, and uh, they are trying to help him and invariably hinder him more than they help. But I thought this chapter was a combination of some emotional, serious topics and some light humor, which is the nice blend of how I try to do it through the book. So I hope you enjoy Oblivion Gate. And this is just a chapter from the book, just to give you a taster. So I hope you enjoy. So Bailey stared at the beautiful blue sky. Everything was so vibrant and colourful in Peronia. It was almost overwhelming after living in the predominantly grey palette of Eidolon. His stomach clenched as he remembered the rain and the mud, the blood and the pain. He swallowed. Living in the constant fear of being attacked or worse was draining, as were the memories which would not leave him be. He shoved the horrible memories away and said in a rush, "When do you think Chandra will arrive? I miss her. She should be here with us." "That I agree with," Keris said. "She won't leave Brennan or the kids for long," Mantra added. "She might for a few days," Keris replied. "Rivlin and Shieldin are here after all. Chandra should leave Peronia. She can't decide whether to stay in Eidolon or move here without at least experiencing it." "Move here?" Mantra asked. "Well, if Solanji can flip back and forth, I don't see why Chandra can't," Keris said. "Mav's already done so much for us. It seems a little ungrateful to keep asking for more," Mantra said. "I think Mav would be insulted if you said that to him," Bailey murmured, squeezing Mantra's hand. We're his fledglings. He wants us to be happy. Chandra being here would make us happy." "I've already asked him," Keris said. "I'm sure she'll be here soon." "Good." Bailey sighed out his breath and closed his eyes. It seemed an effort to open them again, until memories of sitting outside the Oblivion Gate flashed through his mind. His heart racing, he stared at the sunlit streets, the stone buildings, the life filling this busy city. "We shouldn't have explored so much. You're tired," Mantra whispered. "No, I'm fine. There's something else we need to discuss." Bailey pinched his lips for a moment and pushed the words out. "I miss Kiara as well." There, he'd said her name out loud. Muntra stiffened and tried to pull his hand away, but Bailey tightened his grip. Keris curled up like a stray cat claiming its spot and began plucking blades of grass, one after the other, his head bent. I do, Bailey said, trying to keep his voice soft. We never mention her, and it doesn't seem right. I miss her cheeky grin and her never-ending chatter. Keris smiled, his attention on the grass, and how she'd always take things apart and improve them. Muntra remained silent. She made me a knife to protect myself with, Bailey whispered, his voice not so steady. You shouldn't have needed it. I should have been there, Muntra said. Bailey struggled to continue, ignoring Muntra's self-recrimination. Memories of Kiara shouting at him to go back flashed through his mind. He had left her there all alone, abandoned her. Once Chandra has seen the city, we should all go and visit Kiara at the Oblivion Gate. Keris and Muntra tensed, and then exchanged concerned glances. Did I tell you I heard her when I was sitting outside the Oblivion Gate? She was yelling at me to go back. You went where? Muntra exclaimed, his face paling. Tell me you didn't. The city landscape blurred as Bailey stared at it, and he swallowed before whispering, Wasn't as if I had a choice. Of course you had a choice, Muntra shouted, lurching to his feet. You would have left me, us. No, Bailey's heart shredded at the expression of horror on Muntra's face. Everything he said, Muntra took personally. I hadn't intended on leaving you. I was just so tired, and I found myself sitting on a bench outside of wrought iron gate. Mav said it was the Oblivion Gate. Mav was there, Keris asked, watching him intently. Yes, he said I shouldn't be there. He was right about that, Muntra snapped. Hurt still coloured his voice, and Bailey flinched. Keris scowled at Muntra. I said Kiara shouldn't be there on her own, and he said she wouldn't be, because she would be with him, looking after the Oblivion Gate. He wanted me to help him from the side of the living. Bailey, I'm so sorry, but Kiara is dead. She's already passed through the gate, Keris said gently, leaning forward to rub Bailey's leg. I know she's dead, but Mav said she was going to stay and help him look after the gate. Kiara is at the gate, Muntra asked. Yes. Once Chandra is here, we should get Mav to take us so we can go and see her. Wait a minute. You saw the Oblivion Gate? Keris asked, awe tinging his voice. Muntra kicked his foot. What? Keris frowned at Muntra. Bailey should never have been in the halls, let alone near the gate. It was a lot smaller than I expected. A metal gate with latticework and flowers, Bailey said, drifting off into his memories. And you are not going back there. Wake up. Muntra shook Bailey, and Bailey's eyes snapped open. Promise me you won't go back to the Oblivion Gate without me. We'll all go through it one day, but not any time soon. Promise me, Bailey. Muntra's distress penetrated his awareness, and Bailey's gaze sharpened. I promise I won't leave you, he said quickly, and leaned forward to kiss Muntra on the cheek. I promise, he said again, and some of Muntra's distraught expression eased. Then Muntra buried his face in Bailey's neck and shuddered. Bailey hugged Muntra tight as tears dampened his skin. I'm sorry, he whispered into Muntra's hair. I'm so sorry. Keris cleared his throat. You'll miss the sunset, he said, staring up at the sky. Bailey wiped his eyes and stared in wonder at the brilliant colours stretching across the sky. On the horizon, a deep virulent orange blazed as the sun crept lower. The orange sky was streaked with crimson and bled to swathes of yellow and then a pale blue that deepened the higher he gazed. I would never have believed it if I hadn't seen it, he breathed. Doesn't seem real, does it? Muntra whispered, sitting close enough that his breath stirred Bailey's hair. Bailey leaned into his comforting bulk. Why doesn't the sun shine in Eidolon? Keris asked, a clear whine in his voice. We'll have to ask Mav. Maybe he can make it so it does, Bailey said. He fidgeted for a moment, his legs dangling over the edge of the grassy bank they were seated on. I could watch this forever, Muntra wrapped his arm around Bailey's shoulder, and Bailey struggled to repress the flinch. He couldn't help it. It wasn't Muntra he was afraid of. It was being touched. His heart sank as Muntra dropped his arm. Muntra must have felt Bailey's slight withdrawal. He was glad it was getting dark and Muntra couldn't see his flushed face. I think a sunrise might be even more spectacular, Keris said as he looked around them. Guys, we've got a problem. Between one moment and the next, the orange ball of fire sank below the horizon, and complete darkness descended. After a brief pause, Mantra asked, "Did anyone think to bring a torch?" Silence. "I guess not. Do either of you know the way back to the Citadel in the dark?" "As long as we're going up, we can't miss it," Keris said. "What's that up in the sky?" Bailey asked as he peered above him in awe. "Is that a spray of lights? How do they stay up there?" He fell silent and then said, "Is it safe? It's so endless." "I don't know," Mantra said from behind him, his voice tense. "This is the first time we've been out when it's dark." "They're called stars," Keris said. "It's perfectly safe. It just is. You can see them because the sun set. Belava says they are always there, but we can only see them when it's dark." He glanced around and exhaled. "We better get back or we'll be late for supper. I'm starving." Now that Keris mentioned it, Bailey realized he was hungry too. Climbing down from the grassy bank and onto the path was simple. However, the maze of city streets defeated them. Every time they took the road leading upwards, it turned away from the Citadel and confused them even more. By the time they reached the Citadel gates, they were exhausted, and the gates were firmly locked. The guards stared down at them from their lofty heights, and the boys retreated. "How do we get in?" Bailey whispered, his heart fluttering in his chest. "Once the gates are closed, they won't open them again until morning, according to the other fledglings," Keris said. "Maybe we could climb the wall," Mantra muttered as he followed the stone barrier around the corner. "It's far too high, and there are no footholds," Bailey said. "We need a rope," Mantra said. "Where are we going to find a rope?" Bailey asked, laying his hands flat on the curtain wall as he peered upwards. "We can't climb this." Keris snapped his fingers and darted off. He was soon back with a coil of rope over his shoulder. "Where did you find that?" "The well." Bailey wrinkled his nose. "You took the rope from the community well. How are people going to get water?" "I'll return it in the morning. Mantra, I'll climb onto your shoulders, and between us, we help Bailey climb up us to the top. He can then tie off the rope so Mantra and I can climb over." "What about the Citadel guards?" Bailey whispered. "As long as we're quiet, we should be okay. Then concentrate on the gate." "And you know that because?" Bailey asked. "That's what I heard. We'll be fine." Bailey doubted that, but he was exhausted. He tied a noose at the end of the rope and coiled it over his shoulder. "All right, let's do this. I want to go to bed." Mantra widened his stance and cupped his hands. Keris stepped into them and then onto his thigh and then onto his shoulders. Balancing against the wall, he beckoned to Bailey. Sighing, Bailey stepped into Mantra's hands and let him lift him up. And then he carefully climbed up Mantra. Keris hauled Bailey up beside him, and Mantra clamped his hands around Keris's calves to steady him. Bailey clung to Keris. After a precarious wobble, he hissed his breath out and, gritting his teeth, stepped into Keris's hands and then onto his shoulders. They all swayed, and Bailey yelped as he wedged his fingers into a crack in the wall to anchor them. "Never again," he muttered under his breath, as his stomach cramped and he breathed in the tang of stone. "Ow, that's my ear," Mantra grumbled. "If you'd stop moving, it would be easier," Keris hissed in reply. "It's not me that's swaying, it's you. I'm solid as a rock here, but you'd better hurry up." "Will you both shut up?" Bailey whisper shouted. "Do you want us to get caught?" The top of the wall was still just out of his reach. Bailey stepped onto Keris's head and pushed up, teetering for a moment as Keris cursed him under his breath. Keris gripped his ankles, and once they'd steadied, he uncoiled the rope and tried to flip the noose over one of the jutting crenellations. He missed and had to coil the rope back up. "Any time now would be good," Keris said through clenched teeth. Bailey was successful the second time. Pushing off Keris, Bailey climbed up the rope and, with some effort, over the top of the wall. Squirming through a gap in the crenellations, he landed with a thud in a breathless heap on the parapet walk. He cringed as a metal pole clattered to the ground, the clang echoing in the silence. A loud curse from below had him peering down through a gap. Below him, Mantra and Keris sprawled on the grass, groaning. "Sorry," he whispered. When he had pushed off Keris, they must have overbalanced. "Throw us the rope," Keris shouted, trying to keep his voice low, but not really succeeding. Bailey shook his head and threw the rope over the side. Keris clambered up the wall and grunted as he levered himself over the top. They were both leaning over the wall, encouraging Mantra as he climbed, when someone cleared their throat behind them. Bailey froze, his stomach dropping, and then he turned around. He shuffled closer to Keris at the sight of a stooped, grey-haired man, flanked by two guards. The man was incongruously dressed in his nightshirt and a thick cloak. Keris? Bailey asked as he gripped his arm. He couldn't prevent the tremor in his voice. It'll be all right, Keris murmured, stepping in front of him. I think this must be a first. People breaking into the Citadel? And you that desperate to see an angel? The elderly man asked, his voice breathy and low. The two guards scowled at them over his shoulder. No, sir, Keris replied. We got locked out. We were just trying to get back in. The man raised an eyebrow. By climbing over the wall? How novel. This would have been so much easier if Shilvin were here, Mantra said from behind them. She would have given us a lift, he continued as he heaved himself over the wall. Appreciate your help, by the way. His voice died away as he realized they had company. And who are you to know Shilvin by name? The man asked. Though I grant you, she would have been a better solution than the pickle you now find yourselves in. Breaking into the Citadel, from the racket you were making, I'm amazed the guards didn't hear you. I heard you. Our apologies if we disturbed you, Master, Keris said quickly. We did not mean to wake you. Of that I am sure. Only foolish people want to be caught when breaking and entering, and you don't strike me as foolish. Noisy, but not stupid. We're not trying to steal anything. We're just trying to go to bed, Bailey said indignantly. Interesting. So you belong here. Who do you look to? After a moment of silence and fearful glances, Keris deflated. We're Deus Demavrian's fledglings. Mav is going to kill us. So is Adriz, Mantra muttered. Demavrian? They were interrupted as the Citadel's guards stormed up the steps to the parapet. The walkway was suddenly crowded, and the elderly man chuckled. Then he coughed. You shouldn't be out in the damp air with that cough, sir, Keris said, as a Citadel guard clamped a hand on his shoulder. The man didn't reply, just watched the fledglings as they were marched off to the guardhouse. The captain of the guard has some explaining to do. Children defeating his defenses. Whatever next? You should return inside, Master Xavier. One of the guards spoke from behind him. Yes, don't fuss. I want to speak to Demavrian. Send him a message for me. Yes, sir. And that is the fledglings getting into trouble as they try and get back into the Citadel. The fledglings, Keris, Mantra, and Bailey, they're all key characters as the story develops. They all get very much involved in helping or hindering Demavrian in all of his endeavors. And I hope you enjoyed that chapter. So, Oblivion Gate, book 3 of the paranormal romance SoulMist series is launching July 1st, tomorrow. I hope you'll grab your copy while it's on the pre-order price, and I hope you enjoy the end of the story. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy the SoulMist series. Thank you. Goodbye.